Hello, good morning. We start the next session, very interesting session, new market, new sources. This is Fernando González from Solutex. So it is our honor to introduce Adam Ismail and Greg Stephen. The session will be around new sources, an update of the last update on the new sources, and also new application, particularly in the very exciting medical foods area. So what could I say as a very briefly as a industry? We are facing challenging, but we not cook on them. We are looking for to convert and overcome this challenging, recover our demand, and particularly catch up with hidden and high potential demand, turning around these handicaps in opportunities and access growth. We are a vital industry and entrepreneurial. How to introduce Adam Ismail? We say in Spain, by the fruit you realize about the tree. Adam is a friend. I met him in the times of Cargill Health and Food Technologies. The future of food is the nutrition. Sharp analysis, wise action brought this organization from 10 companies on what we are today. So please, Adam.
Thank you, Fernando. My talk is really focused on kind of the next generation of omega-3 forms. We get asked constantly about innovation, people wanting help understanding where this market's going. And I think it's useful to talk about really the frontier of omega-3 forms. And this is not sources, this is not, are they coming from genetically modified plants? This is really about new chemical forms of omega-3s. And I'll preface my talk by saying I'm not a scientist, I'm not a chemist, so you may have some specific questions that other people may be better equipped to answer. But my talk is really focused on what are these sources, what are they believed, what special functions are they believed to have, and what's the market opportunity for them. So I very deliberately chose this picture of Antarctica for two reasons. One is because this is a picture of Antarctica from space, and I really want to talk about the frontier of new omega-3 forms. And the second is because this is obviously a very important fishery for krill, which is one of the fastest growing new forms of omega-3s that's already available. So if you look at where we are today, the omega-3 world started out kind of in the first generation with, with cod liver oil and refined fish oils. And everybody knows this. Some of these oils go back hundreds of years. Our understanding of omega-3s has really been in this last century, at the latter half of this last century. But we've moved beyond that already. We've developed concentrates. We have phospholipid forms, concentrates in ethyl ester, and also put back into the triglyceride form. There are free fatty acid concentrates, and there were even in the 1980s methyl ester concentrates that you don't find anymore. Mostly because of the use of methanol in them, it became a little sensitive. But we still know how to make them, and they could still be made if there was demand. The next generation, the one I'm really going to talk about, are some of these concentrates, the monoglyceride concentrates. Sorry, they're not all concentrates, but I'll talk about monoglycerides, salt forms of omega-3s, resolvins and protectins, which are derivatives of omega-3s, liposomal forms, and glycolipids. So at the last GOED exchange, Tom Clow gave a talk about how all of the different forms and products of omega-3 products in the world compete on four basic factors. The first is the concentration level, so the amount of EPA and DHA they have in the oil. The source, meaning what kind of fish they come from, whether they're from algae or single-cell oils. The relative EPA and DHA levels, so whether it's high EPA and low DHA or vice versa. and the process that's used to manufacture them. And I actually think what's unique about these new sources is that they're bringing a new point of competition to the market, which is function. And what I mean by that is that these sources have unique functions that don't depend on the level of concentration, that don't depend on the source or the EPA and DHA levels. They're agnostic to all of these things. And I think that it's going to bring kind of a new realm of competition. But at the same time, we have to put that competition into perspective, because despite all of these new forms and sources, anchovy oils today still make up the bulk of the market. Anchovy and cod, the two traditional sources of omega-3s, or omega-3 oils, make up the vast majority of the market. All of the other new sources have not been able to displace volume from either of these in a significant fashion. But yet they've created very valuable niche markets in terms of monetary terms. And I think that what you're likely to see with all of these new sources is more of that niche value creation. So I'll get into some of these. So monoglyceride concentrates. Monoglyceride concentrates are exactly what they sound like. They're one fatty acid attached to a glycerol backbone. And where the work is being done today with monoglyceride concentrates is that they're actually structuring them so they're putting the fatty acid on the SN1 position of the molecule. And they believe by doing that it has some unique functions. It's thought actually to better pass through the stomach and be absorbed in the gut. And so therefore they think they can have some sort of special, not only better absorption, but delivery to specific types of tissues. So where is this being researched today? Well, I think the most, the closest to market version of a monoglyceride concentrate is going to come in medical foods. There's a company in Canada called SCF Pharma, and they are working on a medical food for people with cystic fibrosis, because when you have cystic fibrosis, you can't absorb long-chain fatty acids very well. And a lot of the symptoms of cystic fibrosis are believed to be caused by inflammation. So you can imagine that if you're not able to absorb some of the anti-inflammatory fats, that this is a serious issue. And so they're developing a medical food that is actually in human clinical trials right now that has monoglyceride, EPA, and DHA in them for people with this particular condition, because monoglycerides can be absorbed, but triglycerides are absorbed at a much lower rate in cystic fibrosis. That same company is actually working on pharmaceutical forms of omega-3s, and they're working on researching monoglyceride EPA for asthma, and that's in a phase 2 clinical trial. Monoglyceride EPA for treatment of prostate cancer in a phase 2 clinical trial, and of course colon and lung cancer, which are a little further away from development. So what's the market opportunity for this? It's hard to say, so this is all speculation. But what we do know is that cystic fibrosis medical foods are an existing market today, and there's about $50 million sold with just 1 or 2 products. So there's already an existing market for that medical food portion. Cancer drugs are a $75 billion market, and really none of them are cures. They really are, as everybody knows with chemotherapy, the idea is to kill everything in the body. So nothing is really targeting the cancer specifically. And I think that's one of the things that's unique about these monoglyceride concentrates. If they are proven out, they have the potential to take a significant share of this market. And then asthma drugs, which is the other phase 2 clinical trial they're working in. And that's an $11 billion market. So if I was asked to speculate and just guess at what the market opportunity is for this, I would say it's anywhere, if you look at how other omega-3 pharmaceuticals have carved out market share, and you look at how other omega-3 medical foods have done, I would say it's somewhere between, in aggregate, a $1 to $10 billion opportunity. And I know that number sounds very big, but remember that the omega-3 drugs in the triglyceride market are selling $2 billion out of a global $8 to $10 billion market. So if the cancer is what's really going to drive this. If they are successful in treating cancer using these monoglyceride concentrates, then this could easily be a $10 billion market. Now, of course, with concentrates, everybody's concerned about what's the raw material requirements, because we all know that there's not enough anchovy in the market or in the ocean to supply all of these future demands for omega-3s that we believe will come. And so monoglyceride concentrates are a little bit unique because With other concentrates, you're putting more fatty acids onto the glycerol backbone. So it could potentially be it could potentially take anywhere from 40 to 400,000 tons of anchovy oil or anchovy oil equivalent in order to supply this cancer market. So we'll see what happens. It's very exciting research, and it could have big market implications if it comes to fruition. The next bucket I want to talk about are glycolipids. And glycolipids are basically a fatty acid attached to a carbohydrate. And they're also believed to have some sort of improved absorption. And what I think, there's a lot of talk about phospholipids and how phospholipids are found naturally in the body. Glycolipids also are found in cell membranes. And they're believed to have a little bit better bioabsorption because the micelles they form in the gut can pass through the gut lumen a little better because they're smaller than other micelles. So they're believed to have a little bit of an enhanced absorption. In terms of what their market applications are, today I think there's a lot of potential pharmaceutical development in the future, but today, right now, they're not being isolated by themselves, but they are being sold alongside phospholipid by a company called Qualitas, who's growing an algae product that has a mix of these compounds in them. But really, if you look at isolated glycolipids and what the opportunity is, I think it's really about pharmaceuticals. It wouldn't really be economical to extract them and sell them for nutritional or other use. I think it's really going to focus on the drug development for specific conditions. And right now, there is, like I said, some that's a little bit commercially available, but there's nothing really going on with the pharmaceutical research that's beyond the R&D stage. But there is some work going on there. And what's the market opportunity here? I actually have an ingredient market estimate here rather than a consumer market estimate because we really don't know a lot about where these are being researched and what's going on. But we do know that the glycolipids that are being sold today tend to be higher in EPA. So I said the high EPA concentrate market is about $160 million. They're an algal source today, so the algal oil market is $300 million. And they're combined with phospholipids. So if you put all those together, I would say this could reach maybe $100 to $150 million ingredient market at one point. I don't know what that translates into consumer products yet because there haven't yet to be any consumer products launched with these or any similar types of compounds. Omega-3 salts are the next area, and there's two real areas with omega-3 salts that's interesting. I don't have a chemical structure here because there's a lot of different types of salts that you could attach them to, or attach EPA and DHA to. But there's two common paths, or two big paths that are being researched. One is on the pharmaceutical side, and there they are using salts in order to allow the EPA and DHA to target specific tissues and combining them with other ingredients. And then the other side of it is more of just a functional aspect. So there are companies that are like Novatech and some others, including Ocean Nutrition in the past, researched this area. I don't know if it actually came to fruition, but they're creating calcium salts with EPA and DHA. And what that allows you to do is add a unique powder to a food product, or allows you to create a compressible tablet containing EPA and DHA, so a solid form. And they are using these two different applications are using different forms. So the salts today are using primarily triglyceride oils for tableting and nutraceutical uses, while the pharmaceutical side right now is using free fatty acid forms of EPA and DHA. So like I said, there are a couple of different applications here. The supplement side is really about tableting and soluble powders, and some of these are available and some of these are in development. On the pharmaceutical side, Thetis Pharmaceuticals is combining EPA and metformin, which is a diabetes drug, to treat people with diabetes. So the idea here is that you get both triglyceride management and treating the other symptoms of diabetes because you're combining the two into a single product. They also have some other compounds where they are looking at treating high triglycerides specifically, and that's in a phase 2 clinical trial. And then atrial fibrillation, which is in preclinical work right now. The opportunity here is a little hard to describe. I really wasn't able to put an estimate on non-soft gel omega-3s because they're really, other than liquids, there really aren't any. And there's a small food ingredient business. The tablet market is really, really small right now, so it's hard to say how big this opportunity is. But it's not a huge driver of these omega-3 salt categories at the moment. Diabetes drugs are a $23 billion market, and triglyceride drugs, as I mentioned before, are around an $8 billion market. So the potential market opportunity here, again, if you use the pharmaceutical penetration that the triglyceride omega-3s have been able to obtain, is around $1 to $5 billion. Omega-3 salts are a little unique. They're not a concentrate, so they don't require very large volumes of crude fish oil in order to make the finished product. So you're really talking about taking a refined oil product that's already been refined or already concentrated and turning it into this salt. And so it doesn't really require any additional raw material that's beyond what's already happened to the product or going into the salt. The next form is wax ester omega-3s, and wax ester omega-3s are actually, I wouldn't really call them new. And they are actually found in marine mammals naturally, and for those of you who know the history of this industry, hundreds of years ago, they used to sell whale and penguin oils, and both of those actually are rich sources of wax esters. And the theory right now with wax ester forms is that they're believed to pass deeper into the gut, and by being deeper into the gut, they target different receptors. And so the function of that is that they burn slower than other forms of fatty acids, and by getting to those different receptors, they have different functions, meaning that they can target things around weight loss or glucose tolerance. And so, we'll see what happens with this. Right now, the main ingredient this comes from is calanus oil. It's a very small product at the moment. There are only 2 dietary supplements in the world, one in Norway, one in the United States, that have calanus oil in them. So it's available in very limited quantities. And I will say that, as we know, as anybody in the supplement or nutraceutical industry knows, weight loss is kind of a sketchy market to wade into. So we'll watch this and see what happens. At the end of the day, every scientist I've ever talked to says the same formula applies to all weight loss products: calories in, calories out. And so the question is, do they really have some sort of extra weight loss function? We'll see. But I discount whether or not they would have a lot of success going after that positioning. So this is a $66 billion market for weight loss products, and I don't think many products in this space have long-term success. And so I would say, if you look at all of these different markets that exist today where the wax ester forms could be competing, you're looking at a $100 to $500 million opportunity. But I do want to caveat that by saying that one of the issues with calanus oil is that the fishery, while there's a lot of biomass in the ocean, the fishery is not developed, and so it takes big capital investments in order to harvest large volumes of this oil. And I actually think that will be a bigger constraint on wax ester omega-3s as a form growing than the development of any of these markets. Liposomal omega-3s. Liposomes are basically bilayers of phospholipid membranes, and by creating this bilayer, it adds some solubility to it. So what it does is it allows you to take something that's essentially a fat and make it soluble, because you create essentially a polar encapsulation. They're, I guess, technically a nano-encapsulation. And one of the things that's unique about them is you can actually reduce the particle size of fats and micelles from 100 microns to less than 1 micron. I don't know what level the omega-3 liposomes have been able to get to. But the theory is that this allows it to bind to specific tissues. And in addition to the solubility, which adds some functional uses to it, it has the belief is that it has some biological functions as well. So where can this be used? Well, if you think about it, improved absorption is useful, particularly in acute settings, acute hospital settings like clinical nutrition. So it's actually being researched in preclinical work right now with liposomal fish oil for cancer cachexia, so really cancer nutrition, trying to improve the inflammatory balance for people who are taking other cancer drugs. In the pharmaceutical market, they are working, again, on preclinicals for treating cancers with liposomal EPA. And then in the functional food space, this is more the actual function of how these products behave in different matrices. There are some commercially available forms where they're using this for creating omega-3 beverages and liquids. So you're able to put these fats into an actual water-based beverage. And I don't have this up here, but I should note that there also is a little bit of work going on in the cosmetic space, because these forms make it easier to launch cosmetics, topical cosmetics containing EPA and DHA. And for those of you who don't know, there is a fairly sizable omega-3 cosmetic market, but it has not included EPA and DHA in any large way. It's primarily been different vegetable oils that contain ALA being added to different cosmetic compounds. So what's the opportunity for these products? I think it's between $200 million and $1 billion. And again, it's really driven by cancer drugs. So this is, if you think about it, this is kind of a binary way to look at it. If they hit the cancer drug, then great, this is going to be a big market. If they don't, it's likely to be a much smaller market. But it'll be interesting to watch nonetheless. And again, here is another category where yield loss isn't a big issue, because you're taking an existing form of omega-3 and you're putting it into a liposome encapsulation. So I think, again, this would be about a $10,000 to $40,000 raw material requirement category. Then the next and last bucket are resolvins and protectins. And I think, personally, these are the most exciting area, not because they are going to have a big, massive market potential or anything like that. I just think it's very interesting to watch and what's going to happen here. The resolvins and protectins are biological derivatives of EPA and DHA. So your body takes these and takes EPA and DHA and uses in some form of enzymatic conversion to turn them into resolvins, which help resolve inflammation, as Atlay mentioned yesterday, and protectins to help protect cells. And what's unique about it is this is an enzymatic process that happens in the body for both EPA and DHA, but there's work being done in order to make this happen outside of the body, so you actually get these compounds, and they're very potent anti-inflammatories and very potent protectins. So what are the market potentials for this? Well, obviously, again, this is another pharmaceutical market. It's just a common theme with all of these forms. Resolvins, because they are so potent anti-inflammatories, they really, you can think about what diseases are at the root caused by inflammation, and those are the ones where there's a lot of work going on. So, not surprisingly, you have resolvins being researched in heart disease or dry eye disease, which are both inflammation diseases. And protectins are around protecting the cell, and so particularly neurological cells. There's a lot of work going on in Lou Gehrig's disease, hearing loss, and Parkinson's disease with the neuroprotectins from DHA. In the supplement market, there is work to try to figure out whether or not you can launch a supplement form of these products, and that's unclear at the moment. There are big regulatory questions, because once products typically enter the pharmaceutical research arena, it's usually almost impossible for a company to launch it as a supplement. However, there is work to try to identify whether or not these compounds occur in nature naturally and whether they're in part of our diets already. And if so, that might give it an entry to be a supplement product. And by the way, I should mention that Colin Barrow in Australia is doing a lot of that work. So if you're interested in that aspect, you should talk to him. He's at Deakin University. So with resolvins and protectins, what's the market opportunity? I think the market opportunity is actually fairly large, because there's a $57 billion anti-inflammatory market already, and that includes NSAIDs and lots of other anti-inflammatory drugs. And the neuroprotective drug market is $3 billion. And what's unique about this market is there are no real effective treatments in any of the neurological diseases that exist today. So if these are really proven to be true, then this could be this portion of the pie could be much bigger. So again, this could be a $1 to $10 billion market. I know these are not exactly accurate estimates, but you really don't know, because these are the frontier and these are the future. With raw material, we have no idea how much raw material this is going to require. And part of the reason for that is that resolvins and protectants are very potent, and we don't know what dosages are going to be required yet for any of these products. But what we do know is that it's an enzymatic process, and they can target enzymes to actually take all of the EPA in a fish oil and create resolvins from them, or all of the DHA and create resolvins and protectants from those. So there's very little waste. It's a very efficient process. So if you have a fish oil with, say, 18% EPA in it, and you put it through this enzymatic process, you could take actually 6 kilos of that fish oil and get about 1 kilo of resolvin E1 from it, meaning that you're only taking that 18% out, and that's where your product's coming from. But the real question in terms of raw material requirements is, what's the demand going to be? Because we don't know what the dosages are going to be yet. And there's some people who believe that these are so potent and so powerful that you could basically do 2 or 3 metric tons of these compounds, and you'd be able to supply all the world's inflammation needs. And there are other people who say, nah, that's too aggressive. It's going to be significant, actually. So I've heard both arguments, and there's merit and logic to both of them. So we'll have to see what happens. So what does this all mean? I think that the first thing is that there's a lot of similar positioning here. In addition to my broad $1 to $10 billion market estimates for each of these categories, I hope you heard that a lot of them are around improved absorption, a lot of them are around improved solubility, and a lot of them are around targeted delivery, especially. So the challenge here is there's a lot of R&D money being developed and dumped into these areas. But yet, if everybody is working on trying to compete on absorption and say, I'm the most absorbable product, well, there can only be one most absorbable product. But there might be some that are conditionally absorbable and better than other applications, depending on whatever is going on in the body or whatever matrix you're using it in. So there will be some of that jockeying for positioning. And the same thing is true with solubility. If you're soluble, you're soluble. And so what you're really talking about is creating a market for soluble forms of omega-3s versus insoluble omega-3s. And that market right today is very small, and there's going to be a lot of people competing for that very small market. So if they want to succeed, that whole pie has to grow. And the other thing I want to point out is that if you look at today's existing products that are on the market, a lot of these already compete in this area. So these guys who are on the frontier of omega-3 forms are actually lagging the market. So there is potentially a lot of catch-up work for them to do, because you have phospholipid oils already competing for absorption. The same thing for reconstituted triglycerides. They're supposedly more absorbable than ethyl esters. And you have those types of competitive things going on in the market already today. And I know a lot of people are frustrated by those because they create a lot of consumer confusion when the messaging comes out. Well, imagine what it's going to be like when you have all of these other forms doing the same thing. The one area where I don't really see anything happening today is targeted delivery. I'm not aware, and I might be wrong about this, but I'm not aware of any of the existing forms trying to position themselves by targeting specific tissues in the body or specific organs. So I added all those numbers up together and tried to figure out, okay, what's the total implication? Well, from a revenue side, it's between $5 and $30 billion. That's the overall global market opportunity. Is it going to be in that range? Probably not, but if you added them all up, that is the big opportunity, because a lot of these products are going to fail or not be proven out in clinical research. But we'll see what happens. It's important to watch, because that's the upper limit of where we might be. And in terms of raw material requirements for the sources that we know, it could be anywhere from 62,000 to 470,000 tons of additional anchovy or anchovy equivalent oils that are required to produce these products. So that's a significant increase. And as we know, there's only about 300,000 tons of anchovy oil being produced today or in a normal year. And so we can't fulfill all of this demand. And I do just want to have one last point. I want to remind you that this is what I consider the third generation. There are other forms, sphingolipids, structured omega-3s, and there may be many more that are being researched in this room. that are even further from development, but companies are starting to mine for opportunity in these areas. I know of many companies working on both of these areas where they're trying to structure where the EPA and DHA go on the molecule, and they're trying to bring sphingolipid forms to market. So that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.